Hey guys, welcome to a quick discussion about Luma mats. I'm just going to do a new composition. I'll name it Luma. Let me make sure that my composition is HDTV 24. Looks good. Okay, I've got some logos here. I've pulled some of them that have transparent backgrounds, these PNGs, and some of them that have JPEG backgrounds like this one. I'm going to bring this down into my composition. This is a CenturyLink logo. Scale it down a little bit. I want to use a Luma mat to cut out all the white parts of this background. Okay, the way Luma mats work is you essentially take one layer, apply a Luma mat to it, and it looks at the layer directly above it. For essentially, it wants to know. It acts kind of like a stencil. It says, "Hey, layer above me, how do you want me to essentially remove the white parts of the layer," right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and the Luma mat option, you may have this as your layer menu here. If I toggle switches and modes, it gives me this track mat menu here, and there's two types of track mats. There's Luma mats and there's alpha mats. Luma mat is what we're going to use to get rid of our background. If I just select Luma inverted mat, it'll do a pretty good job of getting rid of that white background. But you can see if I zoom in here, there's still parts where this is kind of faded now. If you kind of think of it as a gradient, let's do this. I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to make a new solid, and I'm going to give it a gradient so we can see exactly how this works. So dark, it's black at the top, white at the bottom, right? If I bring in, let's say, let me find a good logo that'll work on this. This will work. I've got my SoundCloud logo, right? I'm going to put it under it because it's going to take take its cue from the layer above it for what to cut out, and it goes based off brightness, right? So really dark isn't going to get cut out at all. Perfect white is going to get cut out completely. So if I use this to use my Luma mat, you can kind of see if I take my gradient ramp and I adjust it so sorry, let me zoom in here. This is my black part of my ramp. Again, if I show you this, I'm just adjusting my black so it goes to here. Let me hide this now. And my white so it goes down here. You can kind of see how it fades from completely on to completely off. So if I show you that ramp, it's because this is completely black and this is completely white. And this ramp in between is from gray to white, or from black to white. So it makes sense that when it's taking its cues from this layer, as what do I cut out? Anything that's below this whiteness point, let's see, this is where my white node is, so anything below this is completely white. Anything that would be down here would get completely removed, and anything above here will completely stay, right? So on some logos, for instance, if I use which logo were we using before? This one will work too. So if I've got my logo here and I duplicate it, and I apply my Luma mat, I'm going to use inverted. It'll kind of get rid of that background, but as you can see, it works really well for the spots that are dark, but these red spots on the spectrum of completely white to completely black are somewhere in the middle. That's why you see this transparency grid. We can see through it. So there's a few ways around it. We could go to our top layer. Again, when you apply a track mat to something, it looks up one layer to figure out, hey, what should I cut out? You know, what's light, what's white, what's black, what's in between. And when it does that, it hides that layer because it knows we're not going to want to see it. It's just using it as a reference. So once it references it, it hides the layer over here, so we're not going to see it. But if I go to that layer, here's our original layer. I go over to add a levels effect. I can adjust kind of the brightness, if you will, of this layer to make everything essentially try to get everything either completely black or completely white is the goal. So I can bring this, I'm crushing my blacks as far over as possible to about, there's pretty close. So when we go back to add, I'll kind of reset this here. So I added this levels effect to the reference layer, right? The layer above where I'm setting my Luma mat, because this is, I want to make completely black or completely white to give it the easiest time to stencil everything out. So think about it like I'm cutting out everything that's white here, and everything that's black will stay. Well, before, without this levels effect, this red is somewhere in between black or white, and so that's why it was having trouble reading it. So after a levels effect of crushing these blacks all the way over, now it should have a much easier time. So if I go to Luma inverted, now you can see there's pretty much no transparency here. You can't see through this at all. So that's how you use a Luma mat to cut out something that has a background. So let's pick another one and we'll do it just to make sure we got it down. So here's another logo. I'm going to duplicate it and I'm going to select Luma inverted. Again, it cuts out part of it because on the spectrum nothing's black. You know, green is somewhere in between completely black, completely white. So we're going to add a levels effect on it, and we're going to crush our blacks up until that pretty much is no longer transparent, which is great. So now if we want to start picking this apart, we want to pre-compose these two layers to form a new one single layer to cut apart for our logo, right? So if we grab these two and I hit Control-Shift-C, that'll bring up my pre-composed box here. And I can name this now logo. It's going to move all my attributes to it if I hit OK. So it creates a new composition here. And if I scroll up, it dumps that composition up here. So my Luma comp is my main composition. It created a second composition, which is logo. And if I ever want, I can double click into that and go back into those two original Luma mat ones I had. But now that I have it down to one single layer, I can do things like, grab my pen tool and cut out, piece by piece this logo if I wanted to animate it, right? So I got my top leaf. I would duplicate this. I'm going to hit M to bring up my mask and get rid of it so I can start from scratch. I'll cut out maybe this piece. Again, make sure that you have the layer selected when you're using your pen tool to create the mask. If you don't have the layer selected, it's going to create a shape layer. Okay, so I would name this like mid leaf. I'll name this right leaf. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to hit M, delete the mask so I start fresh. I'm going to rename this left leaf. And I'll trace around that one. I may have messed this part up. Just make sure that that's got some space there. Okay, looks good. I'm going to duplicate that one. Delete the mask. I'll do the little brown part. I'm going to use my rectangle tool. That'll make it a little easier. Select my top layer. I'm going to hide this. And I'm going to cut that part out. Looks like I got part of that leaf up there, so I'm just going to click on my mask here and bring that down a little. Okay. I'll name this, oops. I'll rename this brown dirt. I think that's dirt. I don't really know what logo this is. I'll duplicate it, hit M, delete the mask, start fresh. Grab my rectangle tool, kind of zoom in here. Mask that out. When you create a mask, if you hit M, when you select it, hit MM, it brings up all the layers of the mask. So you have expansion where you can bring it in, you can bring it out, you can change the opacity, you can feather out the corners, you can change the path. You can also change your mask to add everything inside of what you drew. So this automatically goes to add. So when I draw this over it, it only keeps what's inside. If I want, I could do subtract, and then it'll do everything outside of that. There's also intersect, light, and dark, and difference. I don't use those as much, but okay. So let's just finish this out really quick. I'll rename that yellow dirt. All right, duplicate, hit M, delete the mask, start fresh. Go to my rectangle tool, make sure it's selected. This one's gonna be a little different. I'm actually gonna use the pen tool because it kind of curves up. All right, draw this out. Okay, that's my blue. I'm going to name that blue. Dirt. Duplicate. M. Delete. Start fresh. I think this is a hand, so I'll cut the hand out. I mean, I think. I don't really know. Okay, got a hand. And duplicate. M. Delete. Start fresh. Make sure I get that in there. Okay. Red dirt. Sure. Okay, so now I have all these cut off or cut out, right? So I'm going to bring my transparency. If I bring my transparency back to just look at black, you can see there's some stuff around here. So that tells me that my Luma mat's not perfect on here, right? It's got a little work to do. So if I go back to my original Luma mat pre-comp, like if I go into any of these compositions, because these are all referencing the same pre-comp, right? Or these pre-comps are all essentially from the same piece. So if I dive into here, it goes into my logo pre-comp. Even though I renamed it here, it's all still the same logo pre-comp. I can adjust this. If I bring this out, you can kind of see it. Oh, I brought it too far. That's what was happening. So I need to dial this back down just a hair, just until that goes pretty much completely black. Now it looks nice. Maybe there's still some like white edges a little bit around here. Maybe if I adjust this, I can kind of dial that back a little. Okay, close enough. I don't have that weird little artifacty stuff. So I can go back here, and that should, yeah, you can see that switched over. It cleaned it up a little bit. Okay, so just for giggles, let's just do a new solid. I'll name it BG. Throw it on the bottom. Toss a ramp effect on it. I'll pull the colors from maybe the green. That's probably the point of this, you know, green, leafy energy. I'm going to make it really light. So I pulled my color from here, and I'm going to make it lighter from there. I'm going to duplicate them so they're the same, and I'm going to make this side even lighter. So my start color is really light, and then it goes to a little bit darker green. Change it to radial. All right. I'm going to make the lightest part right where these leaves are. I might bring my darkest part down a little bit. Okay, so I've got a sweet little thing. Now I could animate this as however I want. I could, you know, oops, I'm sorry. I could set my rotation, you know, down at the bottom here, something like that, and do some rotatey stuff with these leaves. But the main thing that I wanted to show you is how to cut that background out. So let's talk about another way. Let me pull up this footage of, let me bring this in here. Another way to use a Luma mat to cut out the sky here. So I'm going to bring this composition up. This is just a quick animation, or not animation, footage of a little lawnmower here, right? So I want to cut this sky out because it's so ugly. So I'm going to trim my shot to start there and end here at the bottom, right? Trim. Okay, so here's my shot. So I'm going to use the same method to cut out this top thing, right? But I want everything that's up here to be completely white. That's going to be the goal. So I'm going to duplicate it. If I set this to Luma just straight up, really, it doesn't really know what to pull from, right? Let me set my transparency so you can see it. There's lots of stuff in the spectrum of partially white, partially black. It doesn't really know what to do, so we need to help it, right? So it hid this layer. I'm going to bring this layer back up just so we can see it. I'm going to toss that levels effect on it. So our goal is to make everything as close to white or black as possible. So I'm going to crush our blacks. Okay, so we're getting there even right there. So I'm trying to get these trees to be as close to black as possible and stop there so you can still see them, maybe do about there. And then I'll bring the whites down too. Right about there, okay? So the goal here is just this area here. We don't really care about any of this because let's do this. Let's take our pen tool and just crop all that out because we don't want this layer down here to look at any of this stuff. We know that's not important. It's really just this upper area where the skyline is. So let's just mask that out. So I'm going to click on this top layer. I'm going to draw just a little mask just right around where that horizon is of the sky. And again, this is a moving shot, so I'm going to go through and just make sure that it doesn't go over my mask at all at any point, which it doesn't. And it may right here a little bit, so maybe bring this one down just to give it a little bit more room. Okay. So now, if I hide all my layers except that top layer, you can see that this is the only part of this layer we're worrying about. Okay. All this other stuff is already cut out, so we don't have to worry about it. Because we know on our master layer down here, we're not going to want to cut out any of this stuff. So we don't even want, when we set our Luma mat to look up here, we don't want it to look anywhere below pretty much the horizon. We only want to look up at the sky. So that's why we're cutting out this whole section, because it's not going to view that as white. It's not going to cut it out. So so this looks good, making sure we're not going to lose any of our sky. Okay. And now when I set my track mat, I'll set it to Luma inverted mat, and you can see that it cuts that out, right? So now we're free to take a sky. I'll just throw a sky image in here and throw it under. Now we're free to throw any sky we want behind it. And now we have this nice, beautiful sky, right? So later on down the road, the key would be to track this sky to the scene, so when my camera moves, the sky moves with it, right? But this is just to show you how you would use Luma Mat to cut out a sky or something in a shot where you want to get rid of it. You'll see that on an iPad a lot. If someone has an iPad, they'll use just a white screen, and then they can cut that out to insert whatever they want later. I'm going to go back to this levels. If we zoom in here, you can see there's still some weird stuff going on here. I think if you do, what is it, matte choker, or maybe simple choker, we'll find out. If I throw that on here, nope, I think it's simple choker. I think if we bring this up, that might not work. Maybe not. Let's see if we can adjust the levels at all to help that. Bring it down. Just want to soften that a little bit, you know. But we still want to keep those other things. So there's a lot of fine tuning here, but I guess the point is I just want you to see how using it, getting this as black and white, as contrasty as possible to give this the easiest time. It's similar to our logo on here when we did this. We wanted this to be as contrasty as possible, right? To help our Luma mat have the easiest time to get rid of whatever it needed to, as I just completely messed that up, but you get the point. So that's Luma mat. Really quick to, well, we get more into Luma mat a little bit on the week 6 walkthrough. There's just it touches very briefly on it in there, but that's pretty much the gist. So I'll do another video